Alright, hey guys. So this is going to be a video on something that we mention a lot when we're casting, and I also quite often mention it when I'm trying to critique people's play. But it occurs to me actually some of you don't know what Simcity is. So this is a really important technique that you'll see a lot of the pro players use in their play to make it a lot easier to defend certain attacks and make certain builds viable. So SimCity essentially comes down to the placement of your buildings in such a way that you get sort of three key features. You get choke points for either making it harder for your opponent to fight or making it a lot easier for you to fight. So for example, having ranged units where they can't be attacked, or avoiding an opponent just rushing through into your base. They're also used to increase travel distance. So the further you can make your enemy walk before they can actually get to what they want to attack is pretty important, and you'll see that in some of the setups I'll show you in a minute. And the other thing is also reducing building vulnerability. So say for example you have a tower as part of your defense. A good SimCity will limit the amount of surface area on that tower, so it's less vulnerable to certain types of attacks. So if we take a look at this setup, this is a really common setup, or type of setup you'll see people do as they sort of do a racks expand, with sort of the two buildings at the front here and the soldiers here. Now this type of setup is what's known as a wall. So this is not necessarily going to reduce the travel distance, because the idea is your opponent can't get through. But the idea of this is to stop your opponent being able to get in, and therefore making it safe for you to then build other things behind it. You might also see setups like this, on a third base maybe. Now, the features of this that are important is making sure this wall is closer to where your opponent's going to attack from, so that to get at your workers, they have to come in round the left-hand side, and they'd essentially have to walk further before they can start attacking. So you get more warning, and your tower will be able to shoot before the units actually get to attack it. The other thing to note with this placement is that the barracks actually sort of covers parts of the tower, so that if someone comes to attack the tower, there's less area for them to actually get in and attack it with melee units. Alright, so I'll take you through some of the really common ways people defend or use SimCity to defend against early aggression. So this map is Cloud Kingdom, very popular sort of map on the ladder right now. And the key, like there's two ways to wall off if you're doing something other than fast expand on this map. So the first one is this setup over here. So what you do is you build a house here to create an initial choke point, and then you can follow it up with your wolves then here. And what that means is you can extend it with your castles, create a nice wall anyway. But it means any early attacks then have to come all the way through this little choke point, which is really easy to defend. So you can see, if anyone wants to come in and be aggressive right now, they're going to have to come all the way around through this little choke point, which makes it a lot easier for you to deal with. So another common setup you might see on Cloud Kingdom is actually walling off at this choke here. So with the house and the barracks, and then normally soldiers instead of workers, but this is just for demonstration purposes. And this has the slight downside of this house is slightly vulnerable, so your units would actually have to sort of go around and try and defend against any units attacking that,
as you wish, son.
which can make this a little bit more of a tricky SimCity to use on this map. But this does work reasonably well, and against most openings will stop them from at least rushing straight into your main base. Alright, so this is probably the most common setup you will encounter if you play on Ravaged. Now, this has some weak points. mainly just because this house and this den are fairly exposed in terms of the surface area. So these can be a little bit tricky, but this allows you to at least get a wall off. So it really slows down anyone trying to rush straight into your main base. You've got a decent choke point here near the bottom of your ramp. And also with the workers mining at the gold mine, they can quickly just turn into wall if they attack, move, or hold position to stop anyone sort of trying to get round. So this is one of the safest ways to set up your one den expand on this map. You can create some smaller chokes, but they do lack some other features, which this is generally the most solid way to set up your SimCity for your first expansion on this map. So moving on to Cloud Kingdom, this is a setup you can use to make your opening a little bit safer as well. So the idea of this is you start off with the den expand or barracks expand, depending on which you want, and then you lead it up into the castle. So this way you get a nice wall, it stops people rushing straight for your main ramp. And same as on Ravaged, you've just got this choke point here with the workers, which is fairly easy to defend. The nice bit about this setup is your house is actually a lot less exposed. So you can see there's only about sort of 2 tiles here where units can actually get to attack it. The Wolves Den is still fairly exposed, but Wolves Dens have a lot more HP than the houses do, which means they're less important if they get taken out, and they also obviously cost about 100 gold less. So this is a nice setup you can use. Some people like to have the house and wolves den a little bit lower down, but there's really no advantage to that. This is probably one of the more well-rounded setups for your expansion here. The only issue with this setup is if you don't have any units out too early or you get pressured back, before your castle goes up, there's nothing really to stop them taking too much longer to get to this main ramp. So you may find you prefer to put buildings up here, but do bear in mind that will leave your castle more vulnerable later in the game. So I'd also like to show you an alternate setup for overgrowth, which this loses a tiny bit of efficiency on your castle due to the placement, and it does leave your house a lot more vulnerable. The big benefit of this positioning, however, is it gives you this tiny little choke on the right hand side to avoid units rushing you in. And you can see here, although I let one in, it's a lot easier for me to defend this and prevent units from coming in this way, and also to have my archer in a nice safe position in the back, than if my buildings were just spread out within my base. So when you play, try to consider where your buildings are going as well as where your units are going, because good SimCity can make the difference between a win or a loss, and it's not too hard to do once you've got the basics. So, good luck in your games, and see if you can get that SimCity down. See you next time.